I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ashifi Gogo. Dr. Gogo is founder and CEO of Sproxil, an innovative organization that uses technology to combat distribution of counterfeit medicine around the world. We are so honored to have him as a faculty member in the Masters in Technology Management program at the School of Professional Studies. His achievements in product innovation, social entrepreneurship, and leadership have earned him and his company a great deal of recognition. In 2014, he was named Social Entrepreneur of the Year by the Schwab Foundation. And in 2013, Sproxil was named the world's most innovative company in healthcare by Fast Company. Tonight, he is here to talk about how entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs get their projects started. He will pay specific attention to the differences between these groups and where their efforts are most needed in order to measure success. Please help me welcome Dr. Ashifi Gogo.
Hello everyone, it's good to be in New York. It's quite exciting to talk about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. And since both words are quite a mouthful and it's hard to say them quickly, I've abbreviated them to extrapreneurship, which makes them extra interesting and extra exciting. But I'm here to give you a brief orientation on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship, and also get you fired up so you can act on your idea and start your company if you so desire. Entrepreneurship is really exciting. It's like taking a picture of a shark. It has a lot of risk associated with it. It requires a lot of training, a lot of patience, a lot of courage, and it really helps to understand the risks that are involved in getting into this because the image, as you can see, taking a picture of a shark, doesn't always show the preparation that went into the outcome. But entrepreneurship is really thrilling. You get to take your idea and turn it into a venture, and then deliver value to people, and watch people consume the value and as it fulfills a need in their life. So it's really, really cool. I encourage everyone to give it a try, because there are actually some benefits I'll get to later in the talk that you get even if your venture doesn't make it very far. But just like taking this picture, there's some risks. 92% of high growth, high tech ventures fail after 3 years. But that's actually great news because 8% make it, which is the non-zero number, which shows that a lot of companies can get through the eye of the needle and make it to the other end. So entrepreneurship is fun. When we talk about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, generally we think about the garage versus the cubicle. And while it's true that several ideas come out of the garage and there's perhaps more focus in the media about entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship is also quite interesting in that you use the same types of skills that you have as entrepreneurs, which is you need an innovation, you get that perhaps from an R&D lab, and then you turn that innovation into a sustainable business. The only difference between intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship, using that definition, is whether you do it starting a new company or whether you do it within an existing company. You start doing a new company, it's typically called entrepreneurship. If you start within an existing company, it's called intrapreneurship, intra within the organization. There's a lot that's common between those two goalposts. And so both the intrapreneur and entrepreneur would need an innovation. You typically have to raise some capital to get going. You have to put a team together. You'll have to experience a high uncertainty. It's a new idea, it may or may not work. But then there's some differences that make one or the other more appealing to you. Entrepreneurs generally would start with bootstrapping their company. And so that means going back to the graduate school or undergraduate school days of ramen noodle dinners, which may or may not be appealing to you and your spouse at this time in your professional career. But that's one thing to keep in mind. You generally start by bootstrapping your business, and that means deploying your own personal capital. And so you have to make some personal choices that may or may not align with your current values. The other difference is that there's a little bit of a credibility gap when an entrepreneur is starting. If I were to start Ashifi and Friends company, you have no idea whether we brew beer or make shoes, right? But if you're an entrepreneur and you put down your business card and it says, for instance, Microsoft, you already have an idea what the company does, even though your project may not necessarily be exactly what the person knows the company for, but they already have an idea, they already know you're from a reputable company, you're not unlikely to waste your time, they'll take your meeting, so you get a little bit of a benefit when you're an entrepreneur versus an entrepreneur when you're getting started. However, entrepreneurs also have some challenges that they have to surmount. If you're an entrepreneur, and say you work at a company that makes mousetraps, and your innovative new mousetrap doesn't really catch any mice, but is actually really good at feeding mice. The little baits that you put on there actually is really good at attracting mice, and so all of a sudden your innovation is awesome mouse food. But your parent company makes mousetraps, so you can't catch any mice, you don't really belong. And so you have a great product, it doesn't really go anywhere within the parent company, and the project may get wound up, and you may not be able to enjoy the entrepreneurial career. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur, you can pivot quite easily. So you go from the mousetrap company to the mouse feeding company, and change your logo around, get a new slogan, spruce up the website a little bit, and off you go, right? So you have more flexibility when you're an entrepreneur in some cases compared to an entrepreneur. So with that in mind, what does it take to get going? Right, what does it take to lead a pack? You have to be fairly resilient. A lot of the projects that I undertake end up in failure. And it's not that I don't try hard enough, but it is just the nature of experimentation. You go out, you talk to clients. Some may want what you offer, some may not want what you offer. You take in the feedback, you learn, you keep going. So it's an iterative process, and the more and more you do it, the better and better you get, to the point where you could see 8% chances of success as great news. There's an opportunity out there, and not really look or focus too much on the areas of failure. So that's one thing that is really key here. The other thing is you have to be self-motivated. No one will tell you if you're an entrepreneur, no one will tell you to get up and go do the work that you need to do to get your company going, right? You have to decide that is the best thing for you to do with your time and get going based on your own conviction. You also, it helps to be curious. You see a little quirk or something that doesn't really sit well with you, ask questions. You're self-confident, and you're able to take feedback without curling into a ball at midnight, at least in public. You can do it in private, it happens all the time. What helps when you're thinking about being an entrepreneur? When you're an entrepreneur, you have to be a coalition builder. And so you start a project within a company, it's unlikely you're going to be the only person working on a project within a company that has thousands of employees. So you have to get a coalition together. You have to get people from different departments and backgrounds to work with you on the project. So learning that skill is important. You also have to be really decent at forecasting. Entrepreneurs can get away a little bit with the hockey stick, traditional, we'll start and nobody really know what we're doing, so our revenue numbers will be low, and then the market will click in, and then off goes our revenue numbers. We start printing money left and right. Everybody knows that's not true, but venture capitalists who typically fund entrepreneurs want to get a sense of how large your dream is, so that's the story that's frequently told. But with entrepreneurs, especially publicly listed companies, forecasting and hitting your numbers is key. So you can't really come up with huge numbers that are the best case scenario. You have to be a little bit more conservative, and it's really hard to predict the future when you're talking about these predictions and numbers. So now that you're all fired up and you're thinking about taking the plunge, running off the hill and hoping everything works out, you're thinking about how do I get started, right? So you need capital to get started. And where do you get capital? You go to the people who sell money, venture capitalists. Now, it turns out that venture capitalists actually fund a very, very small slice of new companies that get started in America. They fund less than 1% of companies get started. In fact, they fund around 0.5% of companies that get started in the US. Most of the money that gets dedicated to startups actually comes from personal sources, credit cards, and loans. The second is friends and family. And these are amounts that are not very large. For instance, personal loans and credit cards, about $50,000 is the average. Friends and family, about $20,000 is the average. Or angel investors, these are high net worth individuals who funded just under 1% of companies recently. So even in the late 1990s, where capital was very liberal, and if you could define what HTML stood for, you could actually start a company and get funded, you only saw 1.27% of companies funded by venture capital. So don't go to VCs day one. Start with these other sources of funding, angel capital, as well as friends and family, and even more importantly, your own personal capital. To give you an example, how much money do you think it took to get Dell going? $1,000. You could spend $1,000 on lunch here in New York, right? But that's all it took to get Dell going. GoPro, which is perhaps more of the times, it didn't take millions and millions of dollars, right? It took a low six-figure amount to get the company going. And so it is possible to get very large companies going with very little capital. And it makes a lot of sense to look at business plan competitions, grants, or early clients, especially as entrepreneurs. You could access the client list of the parent corporation to be able to draw on the experience, get some early contracts to get going, which actually validates the idea and sets you up to get additional capital in the future. So, lastly, to get you going on your entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial journey, there's one thing that's really important. It turns out that timing is the most important factor in determining whether an idea is successful or not as a sustainable venture. We talk a lot about the sharing economy. Companies like Airbnb existed long before they became famous. And it's because the timing worked out such that the economy was in a state that people wanted a lot of additional income, that they set up these companies. They started accessing these companies to be able to generate additional revenue on an individual basis. When there's a TED Talk by Bill Gross, who's an experienced invested in dozens of startup companies in the Silicon Valley area, looked at the various factors that determine success. Actually, money is dead last behind the business model, the quality of the idea, the team, and then timing. So think about the burning issues in today's society. What idea has got the best timing today, or what idea will have the best timing in a few months, and start working on it today. Because even if you fail, studies show that professionals with an entrepreneurial background make 10% more in compensation than those that don't have an entrepreneurial background, even if the company didn't go forward. So what do you have to lose? Thank you.